Why water storage? Just very, very simply, Ministry of Environment guidelines provide three reasons, and they have fairly well-established formulae for determining how much volume you want. If you look at the graphic on the right, the key takeaway there is that at different times throughout the day, you have shorter term peaks of demand from your customers. And if you don't have storage, really your treatment facility and your supply has to be able to meet those short-term peaks. If you have sufficient storage, you can meet those peaks and then catch up, if you want to look at it that way, when demands subside middle of the night. So we call that equalization storage. That's one function that your storage facility plays. Fire protection is a very significant one. And then what we consider emergency storage, which is just a function of the earlier two. Essentially, they're all linked to population one way or another. So the bigger your community, the more storage would be recommended by those ministry guidelines. General options for facilities, what we call an elevated tank or elevated water storage tank. And that's really, I'll show you a picture in the next slide. It's like a big bulb at the top of a tower where all this storage is provided up at a height where it's available by gravity once it's pumped up there. And some local examples, if you're out and about, that you'd see that would be Lucknow, Listowel, Ripley, Mildmay. There are others, but those are some of the closest ones. A standpipe where the water is stored really from ground level and up is what you currently have in Wingham. It's really an above grade reservoir, if you want to look at it that way. Other local examples beyond Wingham would be Point Clark, Kincard, and Tiverton. Some of those facilities have a booster pumping station, which makes the whole volume available through pumping. And some, like in Wingham, do not, where only a limited amount is available by gravity. So I called that kind of an above grade reservoir, if you want to look at it that way. There are also buried concrete reservoirs, along with a booster pumping station to make that volume available. Blythe has a small reservoir, and other local examples would be Clinton and Milverton. So just visually moving from left to right, on the left-hand side, there's a booster pumping station, a couple of architectural finishes adjacent to a buried concrete reservoir, the fairly new Lucknow Tower in the middle there, an elevated tank, and then a standpipe on the right-hand side. Advantages and disadvantages of the different options. They can be quite site-specific. Operators tend to have their own preferences on which style, and I've heard it all before. Some that vow to never put in one style because they love style A, and then another operator will have the completely opposite opinion on that. Typically, if it's a project where some kind of new land is required for the facility, it's subject to a Class CA process, and you go through that process to compare different options and pick a preferred one. And you'd evaluate those options based on natural, social, cultural, economic, and technical considerations. I won't go through all of this because, again, I understand that economic would be a key interest today. But if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt me. Focusing on the economic, there's no way around it. They're all fairly high capital expenditures, no matter what you're doing. And kind of skipping to the bottom of that economic slide, we've tried looking at this over time as part of other EAs, and not just the initial capital expenditure, but looking at long-term operations, maintenance, all that over time. And from our own kind of analyses in our office, looking at, say, an 80-year life cycle for these facilities, once you factor everything in, we really don't see a huge economic variation from one style over another. With an elevated tank, I mean, you build it and there it is. You're not really going to change it over time. There's some cost associated with exterior cleaning, interior cleaning, eventually recoatings. Those don't happen annually or every 5 years. They're kind of spread out. With a standpipe, you have the same kind of cleaning considerations. Eventually, you need to address potential sealant issues. The one, I suppose, advantage with a standpipe could be that you could defer the expenditure of a booster pumping station to go with it. So what I mean is you could build the standpipe in year one, and then if you wanted to defer costs, you could put the booster station in at a later time. The disadvantage to that is that you're very limited then in the volume that's available from that standpipe by gravity without the booster station. So again, I think the key takeaway from our end is that over time, we really don't see a massive variation in life cycle costs between the different options. I haven't included reservoirs in there simply because we don't see them as commonly in this geographic area, but they're always an option as well.
And Councilor Palmer, please.
Yeah, Andrew, I'm just wondering, in a standpipe, what percentage is actually usable?
Yeah.
Without the other station?
Yeah, great question. Typically, well under 10% of it. So I think I can't remember the numbers here in Wingham exactly, but one way to look at it would be it's operationally typically only the top 3, 4, maybe 5 feet of water column that would be available. It's drawn down, and then that would call your well supply to operate and fill it back up. If it drops too much below that, then you need to have the pumps to bring the pressure up.
Follow up, no, like, for efficiency and like how much of the actual tank would be usable from a pressure standpoint?
Less than 10%.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So as soon as the pumps come on, that's about the same time as it's basically done for pressurizing the system then, eh?
Yeah, and it's just because of the significant volume that would be stored, I guess, below the elevation. It puts out a suitable pressure to meet ministry guidelines. So in the event that you have the booster station there, as that water level drops, those pumps will operate, continue to draw down your level, but the pumps are what is adding the pressure, not gravity at that point. And eventually it would drain and you got to fill it back up.
Thanks, through. So we don't have a booster pumping station now, correct?
That's correct.
Correct. So I just want to go back to a comment that was made in the September 16th report. So it reads, as previously reported, replacement of the existing standpipe is an option. In addition to replacing the existing standpipe, a booster pumping station would needed to ensure adequate fire suppression. So does that mean we don't have adequate fire suppression now with our existing standpipe? Like I guess I want to get qualification on this statement. Like why was this statement put into this report? Like, does a standpipe without a booster station provide adequate fire suppression or not?
Could we maybe just have Chad reply, please?
Yeah, through you, Reeve. It's a tough question. We over the years we've had adequate fire suppression. But as the world changes and the community gets bigger, my fear is we might not have adequate fire suppression. And we could have one significant fire on the main street and possibly not have adequate fire suppression. I know right now when we do have significant fires, we immediately have to call Veolia and update them that we have this, and it's my understanding they're turning on other pumps just to help us do the job we need to do. So I hope that answers your question.
But it sounds like it's manageable though for the foreseeable future.
It's manageable, but if the community gets bigger, I would fear it's not manageable.
Good. And then my other question, going back to the I forget when it was dated, the previous BM Ross report, it was recommended that a standpipe be replaced, but with a larger standpipe. But I'm unsure about how much larger the larger standpipe would be than the existing standpipe. Like how much extra capacity can we put into a standpipe more than what we have today? I don't know if that's something you can answer off the top of your head.
Yep, when we, so the last that we would have been involved in that would have been at the time of the 2020 master plan. And I believe at the time it was recommended, and this is based on growth projections over time, what kind of volume would be required going to a 2,600 cubic meter facility, whereas I think the current facility is 18 or 1,900. So some increase there in addition to making it slightly taller, which does provide some additional benefit for the available volume by gravity. But that notwithstanding, it was still a recommendation to include a booster pumping station again to make the full volume usable. If I could add a little bit to the question about like current fire suppression, one advantage you have right now is a relatively significant well supply system. But to add to the fire chief's comment, over time as the community grows and your sort of other demands increase, you have less surplus available within that well supply. So you, as your demand goes up, you can rely on that less and less, if you want to look at it that way, to help during those fire events. So right now, if the demand is low enough and Veolia is called to help activate more pumps, you can rely on that to some extent. But as the community grows, you want to rely on that less and less. In addition to some of the kind of big picture economic considerations for the different facilities, during an EA, we get pretty involved discussing with staff and with operators some of the technical and operational preferences. And a fairly significant one for an elevated tank is that really mechanically they're quite simple. If it's at a site where there's no, like some of these sites have a well supply to go hand in hand with it, and you get into treatment and all of that. But at most facilities, that's not the case, and it's really a simple pipe in and out with limited controls. So very, very non-complex operation. Whereas a standpipe, again, to utilize that full volume, you got your booster station, and at a reservoir, you certainly have a booster pumps and a standby generator and all that goes with that. Again, looking at more, I guess, construction specific and site specific advantages and disadvantages. Here's a couple of photos for a standpipe being replaced, and you can see fairly tight quarters there, where an existing standpipe is being kept active while a new replacement one is being built immediately adjacent to it. An elevated tank on the left-hand side there's the excavation for what's really a fairly large foundation. But then once it's built, it really occupies a relatively small footprint. Boiling it down, and again, this is just general experience. Every community might be a little bit different. Every site might be a bit different, but what we commonly would see as the top criteria would be a desire for simplicity with operation, and that would favor an elevated tank. We talk about power outages a fair bit in this part of the world, and trying to keep your source of supply secure. Even with a case of a standpipe or a reservoir that has a booster pumping station, you would have a standby generator to help protect against that. It's just, issues can still arise with that, even if you make all those plans. And again, an elevated tank, once the water's up there, it's all available by gravity, and you could have a complete power outage and still make use of it. So that favors it. Economic, again, over the grand scheme of a life cycle, we really don't see a clear advantage for one over another. But again, you have some opportunity if you wanted to defer cost for a booster station with the ET. And then it's also commonly talked about is the visual impact from elevated storage. That's either a positive or a negative, depending on perspective, I suppose. And talking with the contractors that build these elevated tanks, it's funny, more than once they've had a main project delay come from trying to figure out what logo to put on top of the tower once it's built. So things that we don't care about maybe in my world so much, but they're important to communities because it really is a landmark then for the community. This is where we get into some economics, and what I really want to do here is illustrate how things have changed over time. And there was a couple year period in there that we'd all love to forget called COVID that had a pretty significant impact on the way that we saw pricing come in for these. So again, we really haven't done much in the way of reservoirs in the local area over the last decade or so. You'll see just from this table that the elevated tanks have been a bit of a preference in our geographic area, just because there's more of those projects in the table. But going all the way back to 2009, and this is looking at Huron, Perth specific locations, a tank with a storage volume of 4,000 cubic meters came in at about 2.6 million. And then fast forwarding to 2016, 2018, a couple of different tanks there ranging from about 1,000 to about 1,500 cubic meters in the $2 to $2.8 million range. Now that higher one included well supplies and treatment equipment and all that, which added some cost. One of the takeaways here would be that whether you make a tank, 500 cubic meters bigger or smaller, there's a fair bit of economy to scale. It's not like if you double the volume of a tank, you're going to double the cost. Once they're there, building that concrete pedestal, building the tank, it's only incrementally more to get more volume. A few more years go by, and we had some pretty significant impacts from that COVID era, and it was kind of an ugly time trying to get budget pricing from, and this is not just specific to storage, water storage, but really anything in our industry. We saw pricing go up exponentially in some cases. We saw contractors and suppliers not wanting to hold prices for more than, in some cases, 5 days or a month because things were just so volatile. But saw pretty significant increases in pricing due to concrete costs, steel costs, and labor costs as well. So in 2023 and 2024, we had a couple of tanks there, 1,400 to 1,600 cubic meters, up over the 5 and getting close to $6 million range. And these would just be taxes excluded, EA, engineering costs, all that excluded. And so it demonstrates a real increase in a relatively short time. The sort of one local standpipe example we'd have with that was built in 2020, but would have been tendered and had pricing fixed prior to any real COVID impacts was in Bruce County at a volume of 2,200 cubic meters and a price of $2 million. A specific note being there, no booster station as part of that. It was just replacement of the standpipe itself. Looking specific to Wingham, again, this is going back to the 2020 master plan that we did. It was identified that the effective storage in that facility, again by gravity, no booster station, was a little over 200 cubic meters. The recommended storage volume was a little over 10 times that much to accommodate existing customers and growth. And at the time, in discussions with staff at the time, and we worked with Grayterio, one of the manufacturers of standpipes, it was confirmed that replacement could occur at the same site, which would avoid the need to procure land, avoid the need to extend trunk water mains out to a new site. And that was identified as the preferred alternative then. If you were to shift gears and look at an elevated tank or a reservoir, but likely, I think, an elevated tank, if you did change course, some considerations are where is land available for that, topography, anything is possible, but the higher elevation ground that can be used, the better for the facility, just in terms of minimizing construction costs. I mean, if you had a small mountain adjacent to your community, the cheapest cost would be to put a short standpipe up on top of that mountain and take advantage of that gravity. But we have flat land anywhere around here. You'd want to consider how close you are to your larger diameter water mains just to get the water out from that storage facility to the community. We've discussed with one of the really only contractors that constructs elevated tanks in our area, or the main contractor anyways, for a 2,600 cubic meter elevated tank for Wingham. The budget pricing for them to construct, they've indicated, would be in the $7 to $7.5 million range. And again, going back to kind of COVID time, if we were asking for that price, they would have plastered that with all kinds of caveats that it could change drastically. They've indicated that really the last year and a half, things have stabilized quite a bit in the industry, and they've indicated they're pretty comfortable with that number. It doesn't include that 7 to 7.5 million, wouldn't include engineering costs, which are actually lower for an elevated tank because the contractor does a fair bit of the structural design. So standpipe that would involve a booster station or a reservoir, costs for a firm like ours actually go up. They go down with an elevated tank because again, they're a bit more simple. So that 7 to 7.5 doesn't include engineering, doesn't include a water main extension to where the tower would go, because it would not go where your standpipe is right now. You would need a new site. And then it doesn't include any cost associated with procuring property that you would need to build the facility. We are still waiting for updated current pricing from standpipe manufacturer to get a current budget from them. We'd have to add to that then, of course, the cost of a booster pumping station. And what I'd want to emphasize for you today is that, you know, until you tender all this stuff, you don't really know. But from any of our past work and study work that we've done and trying to come up with estimates, we really, again, think you're not going to see terribly significant difference in costs unless there's something really site specific unusual going on that really drastically affects one style of storage over the other. When we do get the updated pricing on the standpipe, I'll forward that to your staff to share with you, and then just again summarize the values that we see forecasted specific for Wingham. That's it for what I had planned to discuss today, but of course, very happy to discuss any questions that you might still have.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks, Andrew. And we'll go to Councillor Wright first, please.
Yeah, thanks, Reed. As a point of clarification, I can't recall from a previous report, but is the intent to build a new standpipe on the existing location before the old one is removed? Is that, do we have enough land to do that?
Yes, and again, back during that master plan time, we actually had one of these builders come to site, do some preliminary design and confirm things. And that would be what they've indicated they could do would be construct the new standpipe with the other one still active to build then a booster pumping station at the same site. I think would require that you have the current one demolished first to make some more footprint available for a booster station there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I just a question for myself. Is there enough room for a booster at that same location up on John?
It is tight, and so you'd likely face some slightly elevated construction costs just because they may have to shore their excavation for the foundation and that kind of thing there. But there would be enough room to build it. In terms of sort of contractor access and laydown area, back at the time, it's a few years ago, but one of the comments was that you'd likely want to be in discussions then with the hospital regarding making temporary use of some parking lot area just for access and for where the contractor could have their equipment stored, that kind of thing. So it is, there's no doubt it'd be tight. And there might be a few additional costs related to working on a tight site, but fees, technically it could be done.
Questions from members, please? Go ahead, Councillor Van Henderson, please.
You, Reeve. Do you have any historical cost of booster pumps or not at all? Are they all over the place depending on size?
Cost for the booster
Yeah.
pumps, it's gonna be, and this is just order of magnitude, but it's probably gonna be in the $2 to $3 million range by the time you build the building, the electronics associated with that. You're gonna have a range of pump sizes, including some fairly big units that we call, strictly speaking, we don't call them fire pumps because that gets into a whole different classification, but they'd be like high capacity pumps for large events, standby generator, all that. So yeah, probably in the $2 to $3 million range for the building itself.
Excuse me, Andrew, with that, was that including the generator or not? That
Yes,
would be included. Thank you. Please.
Thank you, through you, Reeve. That estimate of the 7.75 million, was that for an elevated tank?
that's correct. Elevated tank construction.
Then just as a comparison, what would the standpipe with a booster pump cost you as far as if we're looking at over 2 million for a booster pump, then 4 million for a standpipe, that you're in the same cost area.
And I'll be more comfortable once we get updated numbers from the standpipe supplier. I just know that historically, kind of all in costs, they'd be pretty similar. I'm fairly confident that when we see the pricing for the standpipe alone, just the standpipe, no booster station, it will be less costly than an elevated tank would be. It's just that when you make it an apples to apples comparison and add the booster station to the standpipe again to make that full volume usable, I think you're going to see pretty similar costs.
Well, that would make it equally functionable, the two, so.
That's correct.
Go ahead, Councillor Wright, please.
So I guess this is a question for staff. In our last report, there was a number thrown out that a water tower would be 15 million. Where did that number come from?
Through you, Reeve, that was a rough estimate that we asked for from the engineer at the time. So we had an idea of what to present to council.
So that was from Burnside.
Yes.
So I'm having a hard time with this, right? That I don't know how council's supposed to make a decision. One engineer says a water tower is 7.5 million. Another engineer says a water tower is 15. Like, I'm not comfortable making a decision at this date because I don't think we have adequate information, right? That's just my opinion.
Thank you. Henderson, please.
Andrew, can you please explain a little bit more about the maintenance for both the water tower and the or the difference in maintenance for both?
Sure. For a water tower, really, I guess the common maintenance items would be that, and this is water tower, standpipe or reservoir. From time to time, you're going to have interior cleaning. Inevitably, you're going to get some sediment in a storage facility that comes through your well supply, and it just builds up over time. It's fairly gradual. So I don't know if every 5 or 10 years you'd want to take that out. When you do that, then you end up disinfecting the interior. The exterior of an elevated tank, if you do drive around and take note, you start to see some grime and they can get a bit dirty, and you do a pressure washer kind of cleaning on the outside. So you're probably looking somewhere like a 10-year interval for that kind of thing. The more expensive part of maintenance for an elevated tank would be both interior and exterior recoating, because then you're having to remove that specialized paint that they're putting on and putting in a new coating on. And you get into the several hundreds of thousands of dollars when you have to do both interior and exterior like that. For a standpipe, you had really some of the same cleaning considerations. And then because they're constructed of bolted panels that are sealed together, you know, similar enough to like grain storage bin, a stainless steel, that kind of thing. So you have all these individual panels that have sealant around them, and that needs to be inspected at a regular interval and eventually will have to be replaced. And so again, over time, we think that the costs, your best guess today, we that those costs kind of balance out for the two styles.
Does that include the booster pump for the standpipe, the maintenance, or
yeah.
is there extra maintenance for that?
Yeah, great question. There is going to be extra maintenance and replacement costs associated with the booster pumping station. We use as rough estimates like a 20 to 25-year lifespan for your pumps, the generator, and kind of major process valves. And so if you do that every 20, 25 years, you know, that's going to be, for a size of a facility like this, again, several hundreds of thousands of dollars to be replacing that equipment at that kind of interval.
Councillor Palmer, please.
Yeah, back to the discrepancy between BM Ross and Burnside. What would the estimate be for engineering and all the incidentals?
Yeah, another good question. So if we say, you know, a lot of engineering projects, it's anywhere from 12 to 15% of construction cost would be for engineering, kind of start to finish. An elevated tank, I would say 10%, or it might even be a little bit less than that. But if you assumed 10%, that's probably a pretty safe number. And then again, the other, from our perspective, kind of looking in right now, the other big unknown with respect to costs that could add up is dependent on where this facility is to go. What costs are associated with procuring property, and how much trunk water main do you have to extend from sort of the extents of your existing system out to where the new tank is. And that's, I'm going to say, very difficult to estimate without having an idea in mind of where it's going to go.
Yeah, thank you, Reeve. Yeah, your cost, something south of half of the other estimate. Are you feeling pretty comfortable with that as far as previous jobs that have been undertaken? I know you're waiting for the accurate costs. We understand that one, but like the difference is too great. So we're struggling to find out, you know, what would the reasoning be? You know, one easy one would be someone's covering their butt. And we understand that one as well, but how do you remark to that?
Yeah, a couple of kind of miscellaneous thoughts. One is that like we try to rely fairly heavily on contractor and supplier quotations for putting these together. We end up relaying that information, and inevitably at the end of the day, if things are off, we get blamed rather than the supplier, but that's the way it goes. So it's been very recent discussions with Landmark, the builder of these elevated tanks, that they provided the $7 to $7.5 million estimate. That's not from BM Ross at all. And again, I'm kind of passing on their comment that they've really seen pricing stabilize over the course of the last year and a half. So, you know, as recently as 1 week ago, they're saying that they're fairly comfortable with that pricing. For this, I can appreciate the difficult position for council to make a decision when you don't know some of these other unknowns. If you're into looking at an elevated tank, again, that'd be at a new location, I think, and then you would be subject to the Class EA requirements in order to get that authorized under the ministry to actually proceed. And in the process of doing that, it would become better understood what those other costs would be related to land, related to the water main, all that. So again, doesn't necessarily help you today, but it would at least in part explain part of the cost differences you're seeing, that 7.5 million is just for the tank construction, and there's gonna be other costs associated with that. I really don't want to try to speak for anybody else, but just some other ideas, like if we're helping put together a budget for something in the big picture. If I were doing this with you a year ago, or maybe more like 2 years ago, and things were still kind of settling after the COVID era, I'd want to pad numbers a fair bit. The other thought is that I know in recent months, there's been different grant opportunities out to apply for this kind of project. And typically for grant projects, we'd also try to pad numbers a little bit just to keep them on the high side and avoid be reasonable, but avoid surprises later if things do come in over budget.
Thank you. Just a quick question there, just that we have quite a bill each year with Veolia, and I was just wondering which one of these two could keep the cost with Veolia down? Like, is one less work than the upright?
Yep, good question. I don't want to speak for them too much because they might have different ideas, but if we look simply at the complexity of the systems, there's just less going on with an elevated tank. So there's probably going to be like one valve to exercise and make sure it's operational, and then a few control related things like the tower communicates with the well supplies and vice versa. Compare that with a booster pumping station that has a generator that needs to be tested regularly, pumps that need to be cycled and inspected, a lot more on the way in terms of valves and process controls. So if I had to guess just based on operational complexity, an elevated tank would be simpler and likely to have less in the way of kind of those day-to-day operating and maintenance costs.
You, Councillor Van Henderson, please.
Thank you, Reeve. Andrew, can you tell us a little bit more about the usable volume from both of them? It is my understanding that the standpipe only has less than 10% of usable water. How does that work for the tower, and which is the better option to be prepared for community growth?
Okay, regarding the usable volume, and maybe it helps to go back to in the center picture there, the elevated tank. All of the water stored there would be within that kind of gold colored cone and above. Within the concrete base, there's actually no water stored. There'd just be a foot or foot and a half diameter pipe going up, and just typically only a common pipe. Water goes in, water comes out the same pipe. So everything is up there. Now it has to be pumped from your well supply to get up there, but then once it's stored up there, it's available by gravity. It's just gonna fall out of that tank down that pipe and go out to your customer base. So yeah, you do have to pump it to get it up there. Typically, they'll have several days worth of storage if it's just kind of typical demands, obviously not a fire event or something like that. So if you had a big power outage and you had that water up there, you got a few days worth of supply in most cases. In the standpipe,
The top, you can adjust that depending on, say, you have a big subdivision being built, it would still be enough for growth. What's in there?
yeah, good question. Because you can't expand it once they're built, we try to forecast out 50 years, which is a big stab in the dark. You don't really know exactly how fast growth will happen, but we would never size it just for today's community. It would have a pretty significant consideration for future growth in there. It once it's built, then even though it's sized for future growth, you would operate it to the full storage volume, which is just, again, you have it built, you have it there, you might as well take advantage of that. It's, you know, better fire protection and all that for the current customer base. We've got to be a little bit sensitive to water quality in that case, because if you make it too big for your current population, water can go stagnant. And so there's different things we can do, mixing systems that get added to try to keep it circulated. You know, it will draw down somewhat before it's refilled, and that, you know, if it's oversized a bit for the future, you could draw it down more each cycle operationally right now. But bottom line is we'd size it for something way out there based on anticipated growth. The usable volume in the standpipe, again, it's if you picture in that elevated tank that, you know, anything in that concrete height wouldn't be any use for you if it was water there, because it's too low, there's not enough pressure generated. If you compare that to the standpipe on the right, it might help visualize why only the top 10% or so of that standpipe is available by gravity. Everything else down below that, once it drains, is just not generating enough pressure to get water out to the extremities of your system.
Councillor Wright, please, and then Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, so we have, our existing standpipe has a capacity, I think you said about 18 or 1900 cubic meters.
It's testing my memory, but that's what I'm pulling out of my.
Right, and do we know like how much additional capacity do we have with that standpipe in our current population size? I don't know, like, do we know that information?
Not at my fingertips, but we would have it in our files what the recommended volume would be for your current population.
Okay, so I assume there's some excess capacity, but I mean, so my other question is realistically, like, how big of a standpipe could we build on that site? I know the recommendation was 2,600, right? But is 3,600? Like, I just don't know how big these things get.
Yeah, fair question. And I don't know today. I just know at the time we looked at, could we make it, whatever it was, 10 or 15 feet taller, and could we make it a bit bigger to get that target volume of 26? The answer was yes. It would be a follow-up question with the builder if you wanted to go, you know, even larger diameter or even taller yet. We'd have to get their input on that.
But so I guess what's going through my mind is it seems like we should be able to build a big enough standpipe there that would allow us to double our population. I mean, the numbers seem to be, I mean, if we have 30% excess capacity in our existing system and we can go up to 2,600 or 3,000, that, you know, generally seems like we should be able to, a standpipe would allow us to double our population or serve that population, right?
Yeah, you'd want to confirm just how big you can go at that site. For really any of the three storage options, you can make it as big as you need to service that future population. It's just about having the available footprint to do it.
And does staff know what size we're designing now? Like Burnside's engaging in a design for a standpipe, right? Do we know what size they're designing?
Through you, Reeve, no, not off the top of my head.
Okay. That's it for me, Reeve, thanks.
And Deputy Reid, please.
Regarding the pumps, sorry, thank you, Reeve. Regarding the pumps, so pumps are pulling water out of the ground. Are the same pumps used to fill the standpipe at this point? But if we put in a tower even higher and further away, do we need, are the pumps high enough capacity to do that? Or are we looking at new ones or?
Yeah, another great question. You're right. As soon as you raise that top water level in the standpipe, so if you build a taller one or build an elevated tank somewhere else, you do need more pressure to be able to fill it. But I'm the well pumps you have right now that are currently filling the standpipe, they'd be able to generate higher pressure than they have now. They just, the way pumps work, if you're trying to go to a higher pressure, you'll eventually hit a limit that you can't do. But if you're trying to go a bit higher, it'll just mean you do it a little bit more slowly for the current motor sizes that you have. So if we're only talking like a 10-foot increase in water level, they'd be able to do it. If you get too extreme, or like you said, too far away from where things are right now, then you might need to look at, excuse me, potential upgrades there.
Thank you, Reeve. Actually, my question was answered through the answers to Councilor Wright's.
Okay, thank you. I have just one question. We're talking about if we made the standpipe larger, is that going to affect our local airport at all? Like, I know there's some, just curious.
No matter what facility you were to put back in there, well, either there or a new site, yeah, you'll need to get NAV Canada approvals and all that. We haven't seen it become an issue anywhere else that we're going and putting in. I know that you're a bit unique here with an airport just that close by. I don't want to overcommit myself here, but I believe, if I understand it correctly, like it'll just come down to making sure you have the proper lighting and warnings on that, then rather than actually impacting the airport. It's a good point, and as part of the final design and approvals for whatever structure you're going with, then it is something that has to be taken care of with NAV Canada.
Councillor Palmer?
Yeah, thank you, Reeve. A 3,000 cubic meter standpipe was mentioned. How large can they get?
Good. I'm not actually sure. You know, we get suppliers come talk to us and they brag about how big they can go. And for the size of communities we work with, we typically want to know, well, how small can you go? You would hit a practical limit in terms of height, for sure. And really what that's about is, you know, more pressure is nice in your system, but you can't go too high without worrying about blowing people's hot water tanks and that kind of thing with too much pressure. Diameter wise, I'm not sure how large you can go.
Yeah, follow up. Kincardine has a standpipe. Is it the only water storage they have? And it's just like they're a similar community. Just wondering how large theirs is.
They actually, the bulk of their storage is at their water treatment plant. They have a large buried concrete reservoir there, and the standpipe was built at a later year to increase available storage within the community.
Any other questions there? I know there's a lot to take in here, and seeing none. Okay, I'll appreciate your answers, and I know you'll be sending something forward as soon as you can get that info, and really appreciate the work that you brought forward to us.
Very welcome.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
And if we have any questions, I'm sure we can take them to our Public Works Director and he can forward. That works well with you too?
Yep,
And
more than happy and more than happy to come see you in person again
Yeah.
if such a time comes.
I'm sure that probably will happen. Good, thank you. We just allow Andrew time to go out and okay. Okay, at this time, we'll just have maybe some council discussion. Deputy Reeve, go ahead, please.
Thank you, through you, Reeve. Really, it's a moot point currently for a elevated tank without having a place to put it. You know, without having an idea of what the future holds and what infrastructure is needed to reach the tank, you know, until we, you know, we've got those kinds of answers. I mean, we can, you know, we can forecast putting up an elevated tank, but where? It's just that those costs we won't know until that, you know, we go for a, you know, a request for proposal as to what it's gonna cost us per foot of pipe to put it out wherever. Cause we know it can't go where it is. So, if it's strictly a replacement, you know, the only option is right at the moment without going into conversation or in investigation into other locations, is where it currently is now.
Yeah, thank you, Reeve. I appreciate that we need to get whatever tank it is, it has to be larger than today. We got to think of the future. We do have a spit of land where the elevated tank, no, sorry, the standpipe is now. I think we should find out the largest tank that could fit there and go with, and really zero in on that and find out the cost of that. You know, if a 3,000 cubic meter fits in there, you know, we're hitting close to what we would need. But anyways, we need to know what that figure is. How large a tank?
Yes, Councillor Van Henderson, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I probably should have asked Andrew, but maybe Mr. McAllister can tell us. Is there an opportunity for an elevated tank to be put on the area where the standpipe is right now?
Through you, Reeve, to my knowledge, no.
No, it's too small
understand,
because
yes.
of the big foundation. Okay.
Well, that and we would need to keep the standpipe operational and like put something in place before we remove the standpipe. So it just wouldn't work on the current site.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I think just also the safety factor. I think I've heard something about ice can come off and whatnot, so you need a fairly big area. And Councillor, oh, did you have an? I'm sorry.
I had a follow-up. I don't know, I'll be back.
Councillor Wright, and then we'll go back to Councillor Van Henderson, please.
Yeah, and I actually just, Councillor Palmer kind of beat me to the punch, but yeah, it seems like I mean, we have a standpipe now. It serves the community needs, right? That's a standpipe without booster pumps. It seems like the only downside of a standpipe is it might not give us enough growth potential. So what I want to understand is to Councillor Palmer's point, how big of a standpipe could we put in there? What is our growth potential, right? I mean, if we can put a standpipe in there, that'll let us grow by 4,000 or 5,000 people. I don't know if our ambitions are that high to grow more than that in the realistic future, right? And then again, you know, back to the booster pumps, I've had a hard time understanding why they're needed, right? If a standpipe we have now is perfectly fine without booster pumps, why is it being recommended that we have to put booster pumps in with a larger standpipe? I don't understand that. It seems like it's nice to have, but is it a requirement?
I'll maybe go to Public Works.
Through
Director,
you,
please.
Reeve, I would have to refer that back to the engineer for that
Right.
to give a full answer.
It's to suck out the remaining water in the tank.
I understand its function. We don't have booster pumps now. Everything seems fine. So if we build a new standpipe, wouldn't it be fine just to build a new standpipe without booster pumps, right? That's my question. It seems like that's logical, but yet that's not being recommended, right?
Fire chief just had to go there. I thought he sort of mentioned it was more or less for the fire safety, I thought, but okay, maybe I missed that.
No, that's true, Reeve, but I
Yeah.
mean, we seem to be okay now.
Right.
Right? Like yes, we have to call Veolia. Yeah, they have to boost the pumps, but we seem to be okay now, right? So if we can not spend 4.5 million, it makes a big difference on whether we just replace the standpipe with a larger standpipe or go with a water tower, right?
And then I have a question for our Public Works. I was just wondering, we have this grant here of a 2 mil something. Can it be transferred or anything like that? Have you heard?
Right now, we don't know. We're waiting for direction from council to see which way we're going. Once we have direction from council, whether we're going with the standpipe or a water tower, we would then proceed in that direction.
Yeah, and one more thing, can we get an update on that, on this Burnside design? You know, started in 2022, doesn't seem to be done yet. Should be done. 2 years is lots of time for it to be done. I know the report says there's some further analysis. What further analysis? And then find out what size of standpipe they're designing, right? Like, are we spending money finishing a design if it's not even the size of standpipe we want, right?
Yes, I can do that.
Thank you.
Please?
Yeah, I was just wondering, Dax, if, do we know the size that, Burnside is designing?
Off the top of my head, no,
No.
I do not. I'm sorry.
Because-
I can get that for you though.
Okay, because if it's the wrong one, wrong size and we can go higher or larger, then, you know, then this is a waste of money and time with Burnside in their design right now, because it would have to be changed and, then we'd be spending the dollars again. So, how do we proceed? Staff, how do we proceed? Burnside, what's going on?
Yeah, through your worship, to answer Councillor Palmer's question, ultimately, the next steps of how we proceed is contingent on the direction provided by council, right? So you can provide direction today, you could defer a decision till you have more information you need, what information you're looking for, right? So if you're looking for more information on what the largest possible standpipe you can build on the existing property is, while still being able to support your future growth, staff can look into that. And as part of that process, reach out to Burnside to see what the size of the standpipe being designed right now is, and report back to council. And then to enable you to have that information to make a decision, while at the same time, hopefully having Andrew's information he's waiting on from Great Ontario on costs for a standpipe today.
Thank you. Deputy Reed, please.
Thank you, through your Reed. A question I have, whether it's for senior management staff or for the PUC, is the municipality has 2 water systems, one in Wingham, one in Blythe. I know the one in Blythe also requires significant upgrading. I'm just curious is a large, you know, an $8 million, $10 million expansion in for the standpipe in Wingham here, would that significantly push back the ability to upgrade the system in Blythe? Is it one going to put the other one at peril as far as, you know, going with a much more expensive elevated tank, if that decision it would have any bearing on the whole mechanism of water and sewer in North Huron? You know, we have limited resources and a larger outlay, and one just for future capacity is, you know, over an elevator tank versus a standpipe. The difference in the costs, you know, is that going to have any bearing on the overall?
I'm just wondering if I could
Listen.
refer to staff on just a little bit enlightenment on that.
Through you, Reeve, off the top of my head, I wouldn't have that answer. I'd have to look into that and see. I think one challenge is, like, if you wanted to connect the two, if I understand your question correctly, or
Well, my question was like that, we're talking about that $2 million grant. I mean, was that for the whole municipality, or was that just strictly for this one site specific?
that was strictly for the standpipe.
Okay. Thank
Yeah,
you.
that's what we were applying for.
Okay.
At the time.
That was the overall sense of my question.
Sorry,
Was like
okay,
whether
yeah.
that was a government mandate for this is what you get for this size of a municipality for your infrastructure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Van Henderson, please.
Thank you, Reeve. In our notes, it said on March 18, 2024, Burnside advised us to have the standpipe replaced with a water tower and to go for a grant application. Did that grant application happen for the housing enabling water system? Because that's a different grant than the one we already received for the standpipe, isn't it?
Through your worship, to answer Councilor Van Henderson's question, yes, that grant was applied for, and we weren't successful. However, there is an intake 2 under that program, that I believe closes in November, which we would be eligible to apply for.
Okay. And, no, go ahead.
Yeah, so actually to follow up, so if it's a different grant, is there anything that's actually stopping us from applying to that grant? Like we have a grant in hand for standpipe, can we not just finish the design on the standpipe if we want to, and then at the same time apply for a grant for the water tower?
So through your worship, to Councilor Wright's question, so some grant programs don't allow for stacking of grants. We would just need to look into it to make sure that the grants are stackable, because potentially the ICIP grant doesn't allow for the stacking of grants, or this Housing Enabling Water Systems Fund. So it's something you'd want to confirm for sure. But all indications at this point are that you could stack the grants. That you could, but as part of that process, we would need to just confirm that for sure.
Go ahead, Councilor Van Henderson.
Sorry. We don't have a booster pump right now. If we are thinking about replacing the pipe or the standpipe, could we build a booster pump now that would also be usable for a standpipe in the future? Would our tower be good enough then? Would our standpipe be good enough right now?
Through you, Reeve, to Councilor Van Henderson, my understanding is the current standpipe is coming to the end of life cycle.
Okay. Yeah.
And that was what sparked the discussion to replace the current standpipe. So the putting the booster station in doesn't resolve the end of life cycle.
No, it is the condition of the standpipe that's really has
That's
to go.
correct.
Yeah.
That's my understanding.
Deputy Reed, please.
Thank you. Through you, Reed. Then I'm curious why, booster pump wasn't put in years ago when if we're only using 10% or the ability to pressurize the system with only 10% of the standpipe, the booster pump would have alleviated that. Because we have no above ground storage in Blythe, and everything is done with a booster pump. Then you could use 90% of the volume in the storage that we currently have, rather than just the 10%. It's odd that we wouldn't have thought of putting booster pumps in just to use the usable capacity of what we have.
But if I understand, could Dax maybe correct me on this? That water lower down isn't as good quality though, right? Did I understand that? Because it doesn't, or am I wrong in that? Probably I'm wrong.
No, so it's the pressure is what
It's
you're gonna
pressure,
lose. As it comes down, you're gonna lose the pressure. I can only speculate on the history, but what seems to happen is when you have the option to put the standpipe in and put the booster station in later, the booster station never comes because there's other priorities that come forward. And, council, we're always trying to keep on top of those priorities. So unless that booster station becomes a need, usually through a fire or something like that, where it's like, we need to put this in, I think that would be my speculation.
Yeah, my question was on the reason, or what might have been the reason not to put a booster station in to use the full capacity of what we had of the standpipe we have now. when we're limited to only 10%, putting in a booster, just putting in a booster pump would give you an extra 70% of volume of that usable from the storage of that water. That would give you much more capacity.
At the install time, yes. But at like currently, our standpipe is coming end of life cycle, so that's sort of like we couldn't go and install a booster station now. If we put in the new standpipe and the booster station, that would be the best. If that was the route council chose to go. But right now, like just a booster station isn't gonna help.
Okay, we had Councillor Palmer, then Councillor Wright, please.
Didn't about 5 or 6 years ago, was not I don't know, it's not a booster station, but it was an extra set of pumps installed to give the whole system more pressure. I'm pretty sure the Works Department did that. Because right now we can satisfy fires. I don't know if you can do multiple fires, but Wingham can certainly do a fire and has the pressure for it. And I am sure, it'd be nice to check, but I am sure that there was an extra pump put in. Like just a specific system just to add pressure because we had none in the tank. Like the tank is only about a third full and there's no pressure. I don't know if it can handle that. Physically, it can't handle it. I heard it was way down in the volume of it was way down because it could not take it.
Councillor Wright, please.
Yeah, so, you know, I think whether it's Burnside or BM Ross, I think we need an engineering report on this, right? Not verbal presentations. We need engineering reports. We need to understand how is our current system working? Because I mean, it almost sounds like our Wingham water is just a pressure system. We don't really have any effective storage. It almost sounds like it's almost a pressure system like Blythe, and we're basically just relying on our well pump pressure to maintain the system. But I mean, we're not experts. We don't know. So I think we need an engineering report to say, okay, functionally, this is how Wingham's system works right now, right? I mean, all the key questions. From a firefighting perspective, you know, realistically, how much flow do we need, right? And do we have enough capacity in the existing system? I mean, if we have a deficient capacity to fight a major fire in town, I want to know that. So you know what flows do we need? What capacity do we have now? What are realistic growth projections? How big of a solution do we need? Does a standpipe become big enough for that? Do we have to put a water tower in? I mean, we're talking all around the issues, right? We've all raised, I think, really good points, but we don't have the information, the full picture on either how the current system operates or the true needs of the system versus wants. And if I think it's pretty obvious, if a standpipe can satisfy the needs, standpipe's the way to go. We have 2 million in funding and a place to put it, right? So if a standpipe fulfills the requirements, we're obviously going to go with the standpipe. If a standpipe doesn't fulfill some of our requirements, we're probably going to go with a water tower, right? But we need to understand what the requirements are and whether a standpipe can fill those requirements or not.
Councillor Van Heersen.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we are all a little bit confused about the report we received in March by Burnside and that water tower was recommended and what we received today. So I don't know if any engineering report would help with that, but we have plenty of engineers look at it already. We just need to know that we know that we have to replace the standpipe, and it doesn't matter that much if we got another engine. For me, it doesn't, that we need another engineer's report. It's just too.
So as an engineer, I can say, if engineers aren't asked the right question, they don't provide the right answer. And to my mind, the engineers have not been asked the right questions yet, right? If we ask the right questions, get the right report, we'll be able to have the information to make a decision.
Okay, at this time, I'll turn it over to our clerk, and he's been listening and writing stuff down here.
Yeah, so ultimately, staff require direction of council on how you want to proceed. The one comment I guess I will make is there's potential that a lot of the information you're looking for is in your water and wastewater master plan, right? So the water and wastewater master plan discusses future growth projections, among other things. So if it's of benefit, staff can recirculate that plan to council. Because really that's the base study, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it, for all of this, right? It's the one that identifies your priority one projects, and the projects we're working towards for both your water and wastewater systems in Wingham and Blythe. So I don't know if that answers your question, but ultimately, staff are gonna require some direction here on how you want to proceed.
Because I take it if there is going to be change in some of the direction here and grants involved, we have less than 2 meetings in between here, so.
So the one thing I will say is, so your timelines for your ICIP grant, are, I believe, October 2026. Right, so if you are, depending on what you do here, if it's a standpipe and we're going to continue down that existing path, we need to start doing that, so to meet that timelines. And if it's a water tower, we need to start the process to, one, see that the funding is able to be transferred, and two, seeing if we can get an extension, because there's been no design work done for that, no land secured, so ultimately that's going to need an extension, and we gotta make sure that the province is willing to grant us that extension first, so. And we haven't done that piece yet because we're waiting to have council direction on whether you want to go with a water tower or a standpipe.
If you read, please.
Thank you through your, so that timeline still comes back to of not having land to put a elevated tank on. That process could take 3-4 years. Really, by the time you start into it, to you got all the EAs, done and site plans and such, and the pricing back, seems to be that will be outside of the criteria for the funding. I'm not sure whether that kind of narrows down our decision of having to place it where it already is right now.
Yeah, so I don't know if we need a motion. If we do need motion, I would certainly make a motion to defer. I don't think we have all the information we need in order to do that. I certainly would welcome another special council meeting on this. I think it's much more very valuable to be spending our time talking about such a big ticket item. And we can go back and review the master plan, but again, I think we need to dig into this Burnside design that's going on right now. How big is it? When is it going to be done? And then again, going back, right? Does the standpipe fulfill our needs for the next 50 years or 40 years? And I think there's consensus around the table that if a standpipe fulfills our basic requirements, then, and we have a $2.8 million grant, then it seems like a no-brainer that we would do that, right? So again, we have to go figure out, right? And an engineering report would tell us, what is the realistic flow rate of water we need to fight a big fire, right? Can our wells, the booster pumps on our wells, satisfy that, like in a pressure system? If it can't, then we can do booster pumps, right? But I mean, these one answer brings, it answers the next question, and all of a sudden you've got all the information you need, right? So
Could I ask Carson if this suits your plan, Councilor Wright?
So Councilor Wright, just based on kind of what you said here and the information you've requested previously, so let me know if this is what you're looking for, but it would be that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby defers a decision on the water storage and capacity needs for Wingham to another special council meeting. And further, that council directs staff to investigate the largest possible standpipe that can be built on the existing property while still supporting the future growth needs of the township. And further that council directs staff to report back to council on the size of the standpipe currently being designed by RJ Burnside and Associates Limited.
Yeah, I mean, that is, a good motion. But, you know, there's a bunch of other requests made during the meeting, so I hope notes were taken and there can be follow up on that too, because I don't think we can capture everything in a motion.
Through,
Sorry to speak out.
Yeah.
But what Andrew was talking about, like, he's waiting for some financial information. You know, how do you make a decision without knowing costs? And he's waiting for that from that one supplier or builder. We need to know that. Maybe that's a no-brainer, but
you know, Councilor
Big
Palmer,
thing.
you're entirely right. Anything that council wants staff to bring back for your information, let's put it in this motion. So we can add the true financial estimates based on the builder figures. We can add that as part of the report back for this as well.
Okay, is there anything else from any of the members that you'd like to see in there? We're just giving the clerk a little bit of time here and let it read back and just listen. Oh. Somebody over here.
Yeah,
Go.
yeah, just some clarification. We have the Burnside and Ross. Are they two competing companies? Is one doing a standpipe and the other one doing an elevated tank, or we're just getting a price from, like, why do you need two if they're both doing the same thing? Like, I mean, we got a price for.
I'll turn this over to our CAO, please.
Yeah, so what what happened basically is that going back to Andrew's earlier comment and picking up on Carson's comment in terms of you know, the plan that was done back in 2020, I believe it was, which basically identified that the standpipe need to be replaced. In terms of proceeding with the actual work, in terms of, so BM Ross basically in terms of looks after, you know, Wingham, Blythe, you know, the whole system. Back in, you know, I'm gonna say 2021, 2022, there was a decision made whereby Burnside was retained to design the standpipe that had been previously directed by council. So the scope that Burnside is doing is limited to the standpipe. BM Ross has the overall system piece. So
And we've never received the report from
Burn.
Burnside.
So through you, Reeve, Burnside has indicated that they're 75% of the way done of the design work for the standpipe, but they haven't completed that design work because they came to council and indicated or recommended that council consider, rather than standpipe, a water tower or an elevated tower. So that's kind of prompted this conversation.
So we haven't received anything from them as far as our analytical data. I'm just wondering what was it?
Yep. Through you, Reeve, my understanding, and I don't know the details, is in terms of the work, the outcome of the work that BM Ross had done determined, you know, in terms of, say, a standpipe, and it established kind of what that standpipe, you know, what was needed at the time. And so that design work was given to Burnside to do that design piece. But to Dax's point, I don't know the details of that, but that's my understanding in terms of what has transpired. So if that helps or confuses, I hope not, but.
Councillor Palmer, had your hand up, please.
Yeah, thank you, Reeve. Yeah, we need to know what the size of tank is, or standpipe that Burnside is engineering. Because, you know, maybe if we can get a larger one on and council decides to go that way, well, then we gotta, then the engineering starts all over again and we've lost money. But So they've stopped their process at this point. They're waiting for us. Is fair to say?
Yeah, through you, Reeve, my understanding, and maybe Dax has more information than I do, but they're 75% of the way done, the design work. There's another piece that has to be done before they can complete the design. And my understanding is in terms of they need to look at the hydraulics, in terms of whether the township hydraulics can support a standpipe, and perhaps to the earlier point, in terms of the size of the standpipe.
Just wondering if Daxi, do you have anything to add to that?
No, Reeve. I
Okay.
think that answers it.
Counselor Wright, please.
You know, so I don't understand. So council gave past direction to staff to design a standpipe, right? The motion which was passed was to direct staff to investigate a water tower alternative for the Wingham standpipe replacement project. Council never directed anyone to stop the standpipe design. So why was the design stopped if not at the direction of council?
Reeve, I wouldn't necessarily design work has been stopped. It's in terms of, and I'm hearing tens of thousands of dollars. So in terms of finishing the design on the standpipe, so do you want to continue to spend the money on the standpipe? Or do you want that money spent, do you want to go a different direction in terms of the water tower? Which again goes back to the first.
So I understand that.
Yeah.
My point is that on one hand, we hear, staff can only do specifically what council directs. And then there's other situations just like this one where staff do things not at the direction of council, right? Like council never directed staff to stop the design. So why is the design stopped? It shouldn't be stopped. It should be continuing. Right?
And through Reeve, in terms of the design work has not stopped. So Burnside, that's still on the radar as far as staff is concerned.
So if there's nothing else right now, may I have our clerk read the motion so it's clear to everybody, please?
So currently the motion as drafted would be that the council of the township of North Huron hereby defers a decision on the water storage and capacity needs for Wingham to another special council meeting. And further, that council directs staff to investigate the largest possible standpipe that can be built on the existing property while still supporting the future growth and fire suppression needs of the township. And further, that council directs staff to report back to council on the size of the standpipe currently being designed by RJ Burnside and Associates Limited. And further, that council directs staff to report back on the more detailed costs provided by the standpipe builders for this for the standpipe option.
That passes everybody's here. Okay, may have mover was, I think, moved it. Second, Councillor Palmer, all in favor? Carried. Well, I guess Dax will bring things back or they'll keep informed on us. Like, is that going to be a time sensitive? Like, is that going to fall within your time frames? Do you figure, Dax?
I'll have to wait and see what we get back from the engineer. It'll mostly depend on them.
Ultimately, I can say we as staff are going to bring this back as fast as the information comes to us. So.
Appreciate that very much. Okay, 7.1 now. Bylaw number 72, 2024, confirmatory bylaw. May I have a mover? Councillor Wright, seconder, Deputy Reeve, all in favor? Carried. Adjournment that the council of the township of North Huron agree there being no further business before council. The meeting hereby adjourns at 10:27 a.m. Mover, Councilman Henderson, Councillor Whitfield, all in favor? Carried.